Lisa's getting ready to have Chloe up there on the floor. I fell asleep and woke up, but where's Chloe? I think she's still in the same spot where I left her. Close to it anyway. She's still on the floor. But, where'd Michelle go? We'll talk to her a little bit. Well, as you know, Michelle the Revelator. I thought because I gave her a hard time about teaching on Revelation on Sunday, so I'm gonna call her Michelle the Revelator. Her house is at 6:30 Bible study, so remember that. Make it out if you can. I think she's even gonna have some food. That's what she said. Hey Michelle, what was you cooking Friday? Pizza. You working? You go work Friday?
I'm not cooking, I'm not.
Which chapter of Revelation should we go ahead and study in advance?
It's best to not have any preconceived notions of what it could be about. So you'll take the wait until it's
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we'll be out there at 6:30. Well, we got a praise report. Lisa and kids went to the eye doctor. What was that? Thursday?
last Thursday.
Yeah, it was last Thursday, and Lisa's eyes are. Well, I actually told her she didn't have to wear glasses now, so praise the Lord for that. And she said Belle and Reese eyes were perfect as well, so that's good. And normally her side of the family, her dad has really bad eye problems, and typically it's hereditary, but we just thank God that it's not hereditary. At least it's not going to be on this side anyway. So thank God for good eyes and eyes to see, not only spiritually or physically, but also spiritually. Eyes to see and ears to hear. But we've been, past two Tuesdays, we've not been in here. So we're going to, believe it or not, we're going to minister along the lines of vision tonight. I know that may surprise you, but we're going to continue on that line. And we know that, it's a buzzing. So this thing, yeah, fix that bar. Pick up good. Oh, I got it right. Maybe I'm just not loud enough.
Yeah.
Could that be it?
You're talking kind of girly.
Okay. But one, you got to be directed by clear vision. So you got to see. You got to know your potential. You got to have a plan. As I said, failing to plan is planning to fail. You got to be passionate. If you catch on fire for God, people will come just to watch you burn. You got to have faith. And then tonight we're going to talk about the process. And it's the process where so many grow weary while doing good. But we know, because you guys have been coming for a long time, that God has a plan and purpose for each of our lives. But this plan comes to effect, or comes into its full manifestation, or we reach the finish line, not in giant leaps and bounds, but in a gradual way. God will often give you your vision, but He won't specifically tell you exactly how you're going to get there. He gives you purpose, but He doesn't always give you the full process. And it's that full process that we're going to talk about and minister some along the lines tonight. Proverbs 16:9, in his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. Notice once that I said steps and not leaps. God didn't say He would direct our leaps, but rather our steps. And what this makes reference to is a gradual, step-by-step process, day by day, and it takes time. What God gives you in your heart isn't necessarily going to happen overnight. Oftentimes, it takes years for what God shows you to come to pass. God doesn't get in a hurry. He's an on-time God. He's never late. But it's us that sometimes become impatient. But there's no hurry way to get to God's vision. And it is sometimes, excuse me, it's easy to become impatient during the process. But even though the process seems long, it's not designed to keep us from our destinations. It's rather designed to prepare us for what's coming ahead. And during this time, we've got to learn to trust God and realize that he sees the big picture. We don't always see the big picture, but he's working all things together for our good. And this is a famous scripture, Romans 8:28. For we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So when you understand that you have purpose and you're called according to that purpose, God's for you, not against you, and so therefore in your life he's working all these things together for your good. But as we're going on this route, though it may take some time and though we don't understand, it's important that we realize that God is developing something inside of us, and two things in particular. One, he's developing our character and also producing responsibility in us. So through this process of the vision taking place, he's building our character and our responsibility. In other words, we're growing up. He's molding us and developing us. And although we're born with the ability to accomplish what God has called us to, that goes back to talking about potential. Although we have the potential, yet these things we're not born with. We've got to learn them, because we're all called to do great things, but many people rarely step out and actually do them. It's easy to blend in, but it's difficult to stay standing out and going against the grain. And during this process of building our character and building our responsibility, if God was to show us the process to develop these things within us, very few of us would want to start out in it to begin with, because it's very uncomfortable, and that's part of being molded and being shaped and formed, is having our faith tested in many areas of life. And we got to walk by faith and not by sight. And it's hard on the flesh, but God is endeavoring to whittle away the selfish desires or pride or the sinful nature of the flesh or wrong thinking, to get that diamond that is the hidden man of the heart to shine through. And while we're on the potter's wheel, it can be a dizzying, if that's a word, process. It can be very confusing at times. And sometimes when we're in this life and doing, we know we're in God's will, but so many things are coming at us and it's bombarding us. And it's at times, I say, well, I'm just confused. I don't understand what's going on. It may even seem like you're just so disoriented in the things of life, and nothing's going according to what you thought it was going to be like. But yet that's just a process on the wheel, God molding you, and he's getting you to the place where you fully trust him in his hands and not you out there on your own, being bound by that dirt and that mud and all those impurities. But Joseph, I looked at Joseph and studied his life, and Jesus would be the favorite character in the Bible, but Joseph would be second in my book. But you look at Joseph's life, at the age of 17, God gave him a vision, gave him a dream, but God didn't tell him how he was going to get to that dream. He went from seeing himself on a throne just to a few days finding himself in a pit. But imagine if God had told him in the beginning, if he said, Joseph, your brothers are going to, that nice coat your daddy made you, we're going to rip it off. They're going to throw you in a pit. They're going to sell you as a slave. Your master's wife's going to accuse you of rape. You're going to be put in jail. And while you're in jail, you're going to be forgotten about for 2 years. And then you will get where you need to go. And I think Joseph would have probably said, you know what? I'm all right tending these sheep. Just find somebody else to do it. I'd have been tempted to. I'm sure many of you would the same way. Joseph was in a very, what you would say, a comfortable life. He had a daily routine. He was working for his father in his father's house, had food to eat. But we know how God knew what was going to happen in the region, and God prepared a way to provide for Joseph and for him to be a blessing to his family. But he had to go through what a process. And we know during this process, what was God developing in Joseph? He was preparing him for what he had prepared for him. So during this time, his character was being tested, and then he was held responsible over many things. He was giving smaller tasks to prepare him for the bigger task. And all these things were working together for his good. And we don't always understand what's happening in our lives. We don't, when maybe the loss of a loved one, loss of a job, heartache, financial struggles, sickness may attack us, and all these things that Satan so endeavors to get us out of faith and into fear. These things attack our life. And so what happens, because we don't understand them, we then take ourselves out of the potter's hands. We take ourselves off his molding process and therefore become stagnant and let Satan rob from us our future, our blessing, and the blessing that God has given us to bless others with. We fall short. We grow weary while doing good. And sometimes it's easy to think like it's never going to get any better. And it's amazing how Satan will enlarge so many small things just to throw us off course and to get us off God's plan for our life. But Joseph likely felt the same way during his ordeals. As I said, he found himself in a pit when just a few days earlier he saw himself on a throne. But God was working on Joseph's character this whole process, because without it, Joseph would not have ruled well. But through this, Joseph learned self-discipline, patience, and reliance on God. Romans 8:28. And we know, as I said, that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Look at the life of Moses. If God was to tell Moses what would happen in his life, what do you think Moses would have said? Probably the same thing Joseph would have said. No thanks, I'll stay where I'm at. But God didn't tell him in the beginning that in your zeal to protect my people, you're going to murder an Egyptian. You're going to flee into the wilderness and become an outlaw and become a mere shepherd. You're going to go from ruling over many people and living in lives of luxury to going out and living with a bunch of smelly, stinky sheep and living under the stars. Well, that don't sound too good, does it? But then you will become, once again, a leader. You'll go from leading those sheep to becoming a ruler of my people. But they're going to infuriate you. They're going to murmur and complain all the time. They're even going to revolt against you and try to overthrow you. And because of the way you react to them, you're going to end up disobeying me. You're going to displease me. And you won't even make it into the promised land in the flesh. Well, no thanks. I think I'll stay where I'm at. God didn't show him the whole process. But as I said, though Moses didn't make it in the flesh, we know how later that Jesus and Moses appeared to him and later, and that the apostles were around and they were in the promised land. Moses did make it, hallelujah. He just didn't make it in the flesh. But we think just because we're going through difficult times that God has stopped working to fulfill our purposes. Yet they're still coming. God is working on us. Remember those songs? God still working on me to make me what he wants to be. But he's preparing us for our purposes through the process. I want to say again, God is preparing us for our purposes through the process. So don't stop the process. Let God continue to mold you. Don't get discouraged. I'm not saying that he causes bad things. I'm not saying that he placed sickness or disease, or that he took somebody from you or caused financial hardship in your life. I'm not saying he caused these things, but rather those things which Satan has endeavored to control your life and to discourage you and to keep you from the finish line. As we read there in Romans 8:28, He's causing these things that Satan intends for evil, and he's working out to our good. So he's taking, if you will, this junk and these things Satan's trying to pile on you. He's wheeling those things away and exposing what's really on the inside. And we know that on the inside, we're a third perfect, and that the real you is on the inside. And Satan's doing the best he can to hide it and just cause all this junk to come upon you, to weigh you down, and to keep you from shining in this world. Oftentimes we sit back and say, why is it taking so long? Why did I have to go through all this? And, sometimes I find myself, and I've even questioned, and things that happen you may not fully understand. Well, God, what's the purpose in this? What's the process? And even though at times I'm tempted to be aggravated, I know too much to know that God's not the one to blame. That, these things that come upon us, that God is helping us through them. And because we go through them, we're stronger than what we entered in before. And we know that to have a testimony, you got to have a test. And not only am I stronger, not only is my faith stronger, not only am I able, therefore, to receive more from God because my faith is now stronger and I've been putting it to use, but also I have a testimony, and not only have I increased, not only has my blessings increased, but there's an overflow to where I'm now able to help others out as well. But the attitude of complaint that we find, and we found in the children of Israel with Moses, that attitude of complaint and lack of faith is exactly what God is trying to work out of me and you. He's trying to work out the complaining, and he's trying to work out the unfaithfulness. He wants us to see him and recognize him as God. And under that God is 3 letters, but it encompasses so much. He's God the Father. He's God the healer, and he's God the provider. He's God our peace. He's God our protection. He's our shield. And so, and all these things, he wants us to realize and have faith in him that he is those things. You see, everybody could leave you and forsake you, and so many bad things can happen in your life, but God is always there. It doesn't matter at the deepest well or in a time of what looks like hopelessness. God is always there, and he always will be there for you. But when you get down to the root of complaining, it's really a lack of faith. When you get down just to the heart of it, if you complain, it means that you're either bitter about something or you don't believe in something, so therefore you're expressing frustration. That's a lack of faith. Things will happen in your life that you don't understand, but if you believe God is for you and not against you, if you have faith in him, you know that his word is true, and it's going to happen in your life regardless of the temporary circumstances or the things that you see that are in the temporary. God doesn't want us to go into the promised land dragging bad attitudes behind us. You look at Daniel. God appointed him to be a prophet and allowed him to see visions of future events, including yet times. Yet God did not tell him that he was going to be thrown into a lion's den for obeying him. And God doesn't tell you your full plan because you would be tempted to quit. You would be. Even Jesus, we look at Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane. We know how that he began to feel burdened about his task, and in effect he prayed, isn't there another way? Can we do this any other way? You know, Jesus was tempted in all ways as we are, yet without sin. Meaning, Jesus, even though he was tempted, even though he felt those feelings of that comes upon the temptation and just the heartache and those burdens, yet because he was tempted, he did not give in to it. He did not give in to, if you will, the fear or the temptation to give into fear or doubt or unbelief. Don't give up. Everybody say, don't give up. You see, the only person or any individual that can cause you to fall short of God's best for your life is yourself. Don't blame other people. Don't blame circumstances. Don't blame the area. You know, if God wanted you to live somewhere else, he would have directed and told you to go somewhere else. But if God told you to be where you're at and live where you're living, well, even though it may not seem the best at times, or maybe it looks like there's opportunities other places, if God didn't tell you to go, don't go. Because if you go, you're forfeiting God's best for your life. You're taking yourself out of the process. And if you take yourself out of the process, God himself will not put you back on the wheel. Now, he's there for you. And you guys remember my famous, you guys remember the drawing I made? Everybody, the tree? Yeah, nobody forget that. But you remember all those different paths, and that how that there was God's plan, his perfect will, and then how we had all these other things, and all these other things. There was always a way to get back to God's plan. If you want his best, he requires your best. And your best is just a surrendering of yourself and your life. Love was given, and one of the greatest things about love is that you do not know the response that you're going to get back in return. God loved us. He created us as free moral agents. When we're born again, we know how we have his love. And God exposed himself for us in that he first loved us, knowing that it was possible that we wouldn't love him in return. Do you think God knew that Adam and Eve would fall in the garden? Well, the Word tells us that he knows the end as well as the beginning, that we have been predestined. And we looked earlier in vision at how he actually goes out and creates it and then comes back and starts. But actually, the end has already happened before it had begun. We talked about that. I don't want to go back and revisit that. But God knows what he's doing. God knew that mankind would fall. But God still yet created us knowing that we were going to make mistakes. And that's part of what love is. Love is exposing yourself. And one of the greatest things about love is that somebody else chose to love you in return. Sometimes I'm not unlovable, but Lisa has chosen to love me. So she has made that commitment, right? And we know that in the marriage it is commitment. And she loves me when I'm unlovable, and I love her when she's unlovable at times. But just because she may not always act the best or make the right decisions or vice versa, doesn't change that I still love her and that she still loves me. God did not want robots, and I believe we all realize that. He wanted those who would love him and choose him without being pressured or forced to do so. But don't give up. God will continue to fulfill a little more of your dream until it comes to pass. You may even dislike your job. Yet jobs can serve as a purpose in God's plan. And God even placed us in jobs that will prepare us for our life's work. Remember that your job is a preoccupation on the way to true occupation. It's preoccupation on the way to true occupation. Now maybe where you're at, you may be there for quite some time. But just remember, God is always working on you and in that situation, molding you to prepare you for what He has prepared for you. So whatever you may love where you're at, so to speak, and oftentimes we throw the word love around too loosely, but you may enjoy and be passionate where you're at, or you may not be. But regardless, be thankful for where you're at and realize that there is a process, and God is molding you and preparing you to take you to the next step. God's purpose in your heart is what enables you to keep moving forward. It kept Joseph going because he saw himself as a ruler, and he knew that one day his vision would be fulfilled. Habakkuk 2:2 says, "Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it." And verse 3 says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time." Everybody say appointed time. Appointed time. "But at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Behold, the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith." There is an appointed time. Don't fall short of your appointed time. The vision God has given you will come to pass. Until then, though, we know that we must live by faith. By faith. Everybody say by faith. And simply, we know that faith is believing God, knowing that it's going to work out. Though we don't understand, though we may not like the process, though there's things attacking us, whether it be spiritually, physically, mentally, financially, however it may be, that we know that this process, Satan's trying to take us out of the process. Satan's trying to rob from us, steal from us. He's trying to kill us and destroy us. But we're in God's hands. And what can separate us from the love of God? Nothing. There's no principality. There's no power. There's no human being. There's no situation that can take us out of the process unless we decide to remove ourselves. And that's the gift of love. The ability to choose. The ability to make decisions based on what we believe. And God says in the Garden of Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, we find that they chose to believe Satan rather than to believe God. That's basically what it came down to. They just believed Satan's words over God's word. They thought that God was withholding something more from them, yet they had access to the best in the world. They had it all. Literally, they had it all. But yet Satan lied and said, you know what? But yet he's holding back. There's more. And wherever you're at, whether it be your job or your location, that is still today a lie of Satan. God is holding back from you. There's more. The grass is greener on the other side. Doesn't matter what you know in your heart to do. It doesn't matter that, it's as simple as, just being faithful where God has called you. It's easy to abandon your post, so to speak, and even people, which I'm not against going to other churches. I do it myself. But what I'm saying is people will literally transplant themselves out of one local congregation and go to another location, even though good church, don't get me wrong. But it's not because God told them to do it. It's because from the outside appearance, it just seemed like they was more. As the old expression goes, grass looks greener on the other side. The grass is greener on the other side. And I say that until you realize that you get over on the other side and you realize it's the same grass that you was eating over there, it's just on a different hillside. And then you find yourself looking at that hillside, and because you're out of God's plan and purpose, there's no peace. So you then begin looking at the other hillside and you go over there. And then you go over, and so you just continually are living a life there's no rest and no contentment. But God is still, or not God, Satan still whispers, there's more. God is holding back. You should go here, or, the area you live in is not able to, where you're at, there's no possible way that you were able to provide for your family and all these things. There's more. Just get yourself out of where you're at, of where you know in your heart that God has called you to do. Just get up out of that and go, because you know what? You're doing this for your family. You're making a good choice. There's so many more opportunities over there. I'm trying to help you out. That's the lies of Satan. Until you get over there and you realize, well, I'm disobedient to what God has called me to do. And he's laughing. Satan's now laughing because he has got you into disobedience. And we know that disobedience is sin, whether it be by commission or omission. You remember that? Commission is actively doing a sin. Omission is knowing to do something and not doing it. The vision God has given you will come to pass. Until then, you're to live by faith. You must believe in what God has told you, because it won't happen overnight. It will occur through a process of character development, which will come as you live by faith and inner vision, not by what you see. So just remain faithful. People can be wishy-washy. Those who support you, it can go up or it can go down. At times, you may have more money in the bank, so to speak, than other times. Tonight you might be eating steak. Tomorrow you might be eating soup beans, You got to mix it up anyway. But all these things, we put so much emphasis on temporary things. And that's because, we're in a fleshly world, and we know Satan is the little god of this world, and he's endeavoring to rule and deceive. And even though we're in God's kingdom, to pull us back under the same authority as that old kingdom we came out of. But just trust God and seek his face. When we seek him, we shall find him. And we got to constantly renew our mind. We got to constantly refresh ourselves. We got to meditate in God's word day and night. For then we'll make our way prosperous, and then we'll have good success. We just got to, and it's so easy to forget, just like the children of Israel. They forgot in a short moment of time all the miracles God performed to get them where they was at. But just because they couldn't look past fleshly things, they missed out on such a great blessing that God had prepared for them. They were constantly looking back. They were constantly bringing up the past. And Satan was whispering a lie. Oh, you had it so much better back then. Before the process, you had it so much better. It was, even though they were slaves, even though they were under the bondage of the Egyptians. Yet they could not see the freedom in their present condition and where they was going because of temporal, fleshly things. So don't let Satan use those same things in your life to keep you from entering in to the promised land, fulfilling your vision, and truly enjoying not only life, but abundant life. And it is abundant. It's abundant in such a way that we're able to share. We're able to share, and we're able to help those that are in need of help. So I got done a little early tonight, but everybody say the process. So remember that this is a process. This is step by step. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. But as we remain faithful to do what God has called us to do, what He has intended for us will come to pass. Just don't give up. All right. Anybody else got anything? All right. Well, you guys were a good audience. Try. Anybody got anything else? Any questions or anything? Remember, Michelle's at 6:30. Todd Bailey will be here Sunday morning at 11. And then there's prayer next Tuesday night. All right.